The history of WICS is probably one of the most complicated stories in television history. To tell the story of WICS Channel 20 in Springfield, we must start with at least a brief explanation of the original FCC allocation list of stations for each community throughout the region. After the FCC freeze of 1948 was lifted, one of the main goals of the freeze period was to establish a second frequency band that would expand the availability of TV channels to many communities across the country. The result would be the UHF band that would be used to position many more potential stations from channels 14 to 83. Those additional UHF channels would have allowed over 1,400 UHF TV stations to be assigned. Central Illinois communities were allocated a number of those potential channels for use for commercial and educational TV stations. But we're only going to examine here now the three major cities in Central Illinois that were also allocated VHF channels. Each city or market was set up to be intermixed with both VHF and UHF stations. Champaign-Urbana was assigned commercial channels of 3, 21, 27, and 33, along with educational channel 12. Peoria was assigned commercial channels 8, 19, 37, and 43. Springfield was assigned 2, 20, and 26. Now I'm going to mention this because it may help explain what would eventually happen. St. Louis was assigned commercial VHF channels 4 and 11, along with UHF stations 30, 36, and 42. Channel 9 was also assigned to St. Louis for educational TV. Now, I call your attention the fact that there were only 2 VHF stations for St. Louis. Now, we go back to Springfield. Channel 2 would have been a gold mine for any broadcast group to obtain. In June of 1952, the owner-operator of WTAX AM and FM applied for Channel 2. WTAX applied for a station broadcasting from a 521-foot tower located about a mile north of the Illinois Route 29 and Bypass 66 intersection. That was the location of WTAX AM and FM transmitters and tower. The owners included Oliver Keller, Merrill Lindsay Jr., H.B. Bartoloff, and Ernest Ives family, along with Adlai Stevenson. The Ives family included Adlai's sister and family, and Stevenson owned only 2.5% interest each. Concerned, though, about the possible conflict of interest, the soon-to-be presidential candidate later disposed of his interest in WTAX AM and FM. He already owned 25% of the Bloomington Pantagraph and WJBC AM and FM there. In July of 1952, WCBS Incorporated would file for Channel 2. Now, I must clarify that WCBS was the original call letters of 1450 WCVS Radio. In 1946, the call letters of WCBS were changed to WCVS. Even though brokering call letters was against FCC rules, it is possible that the Springfield radio station may have picked up some kind of a payment for that action. By the way, WCBS Inc. was owned by the Illinois State Journal at that time. The proposal of WCVS was for a station to broadcast from a tower at 3000 South 4th Street in South Springfield in what I would call Southern View. This is where WFMB, AM and FM, and WCVS studios are now located with that existing tower. But that's not all. Also in July of 1952, another Springfield broadcast company would also apply for Channel 2. WMAY-TV Inc. applied for a TV station with studio located at 101 South 5th Street and a transmitter location at what is now the current WMAY studio transmitter on Illinois Route 54. This application would change within a few months, but the application from WMAY-TV Inc. involved more investment, more planning, and would have given the FCC an indication that this group would have been a major player for establishing a regional TV station. The new 1953 application for Channel 2 from WMAY Inc. brought more details to light. The general manager of WMAY Radio in Springfield announced the details of the proposed WMAY TV. Gordon Sherman announced the station would sign on at 6:55 in the morning and sign off at 11:15 p.m., with sign-off after midnight on Friday and Saturday nights. This was also a nod to a possible network affiliation with NBC, as they were the only network with that early morning sign-on with the Today Show that began at 7 a.m. The proposed Channel 2 would build a modernistic studio on Bypass 66 just south of Springfield, which would include the broadcast facility, business offices, along with the station's transmitter and tower. It would also be equipped to broadcast color as soon as equipment was available. It would operate on Channel 2 with maximum allowable power of 100,000 watts from a tower at 751 feet. It would cover a radius of 65 miles from the transmitter. The proposed studio and tower location was revised to be along now what was then Bypass 66, or Lynn Street, now Stevenson Drive, about where the current Hardee's is located at the corner of Stevenson and Normandy Road. So now there were 3 local companies fighting for the prestigious Channel 2. Little did the Lincoln Broadcasting WMAY TV Inc. Group, the WTAX Group, or the WCVS Group know that their quest for Channel 2 would be one of the most expensive, controversial television assignment disputes ever, and would even come up before the U.S. Supreme Court. In early August of 1952, Great Plains Television Properties, Inc. applied for Channel 20 in Springfield. This would be the first filing for the UHF allocation for the capital city. Great Plains would propose a UHF station operating at 18 kilowatt from a tower 355 feet tall located 1 mile southeast of Springfield. The ownership of the proposed station consisted of an out-of-town company, part of the Transcontinental Properties, Inc. That was a real estate company located in New York. The application from Great Plains wasn't the only one for Springfield's Channel 20, though. Later, the application for Channel 2 by WCBS, Inc. would be modified and changed to an application for Channel 20. The WCBS, Inc. application proposed their pitch for Channel 20 that included the address of the station at 523 East Capitol in Springfield, which was to serve as the studio and offices. The location was in the Leland Hotel. The transmitter was proposed for 3000 South 4th Street, just south of Springfield, at the side of the WCVS radio tower. Its transmitter and antenna were both listed as coming from RCA. Even though the two groups competing for Channel 20 could have tied up the granting process for quite some time, it appears that some kind of an arrangement was made between Great Plains and WCBS, Inc. to have WCBS, Inc. withdraw its application. Now, that arrangement was actually hinted at in an engineering document penned by former chief engineer of WICS, Gerald Merritt, when he told of the radio station leaving the shared space of WICS and WCBS after the dissolution of their WCBS, Inc. interest in WICS. So it seems that Transcontinental offered part ownership in their company in exchange for pulling their application. Part of that agreement may have also included the leasing of space by WICS at the WCVS studio and transmitter site. In March of 1953, the FCC would grant Channel 20 to the newly named Plains Television Company. This would make Plains Television the first non-local television station owner in mid-Illinois. It was the same week Channel 3 was granted to Midwest Television, Inc. Plains Television already had gained permits in Little Rock, Arkansas, Duluth, Minnesota, and Sioux City, Iowa. By then, the company was owned by two major entities, one being Transcontinental, the real estate company in New York, and the other being the Balaban brothers, Harry and Elmer. Barney Balaban, brother of Harry and Elmer, was the president of Paramount Pictures from 1936 to 1964. There were other Balaban brothers, Abe, John, and Max, along with Barney, who, with Sam Katz, formed Balaban and Katz, owners of a number of Chicago movie theaters, including the famous Chicago Theater. Harry and Elmer Balaban were running their own set of theaters apart from the Balaban and Katz operation. Their theaters numbered around 40 at one time. The Misters Balaban would develop a number of broadcast properties beginning after World War II. Their company would gain notoriety as pioneering the concept of cable television and pay television during the 40s and early 50s. During the late 1940s and throughout the early 1950s, the company would also team with a group of real estate investors in Chicago and New York, that being transcontinental, to apply for construction permits for television stations throughout the Midwest. Among those stations, that application for Channel 20 in Springfield, Illinois. That means that the application for Springfield and Channel 20 was simply a random event, and the Springfield market wasn't a goal of ownership by the newly named Plains Television Partners. They were just throwing mud up against the wall to see how much of it would stick. On a side note, the actor Bob Balaban, probably best known as the NBC programming executive on Seinfeld, is the son of Elmer and Eleanor Balaban. Bob Balaban has also appeared in a number of popular TV shows from Miami Vice to Friends. He also appeared in Midnight Cowboy back in 1969 and in 1977's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He's also a producer and director of a number of television and movie projects. In July of 1952, Milton D. Friedland, a former sales service manager at WBBM TV Chicago and national spot manager at WBKB TV in Chicago, was named general manager at WICS Channel 20. It's difficult to determine just how serious the owners of WICS were in that Springfield property. There was a large uncertainty as to the future of the station even before it was to be built and signed on. That uncertainty was the Springfield allocation for Channel 2. Knowing that when the allocation for Channel 2 was awarded, it would be difficult, if not impossible, for the UHF station to survive. It was hard to imagine Plains Television wanting to invest highly in the future of Channel 20. When the Illinois State Journal-Register featured a story about WICS going on the air, they described the station as Springfield's first television station, assuming there would be at least one other. The other television station could have been locally owned, WTAX-TV or WMAY-TV, operating on Channel 2. Investing in the success of WICS was a gamble, to say the least. Major network affiliation was certainly a key to a successful local TV station, even without the threat of a VHF competitor. Those local TV stations would exist on the network compensation to ensure cash flow for a station which would no doubt struggle with weak local advertising sales and the fact that most households didn't even have a television. The most important key, though, was being a VHF channel. The television receivers in use in 1953 and 54 were manufactured before the UHF band was set aside for local TV broadcasting. Being a UHF station would decrease the number of potential viewers even further. Receiving UHF broadcasts required a converter box which would act as an add-on tuner. It was no secret that the TV networks preferred those VHF stations for the reasons above, as well as the fact they had vastly larger coverage areas, also increasing the potential of having more viewers. Now, if Springfield was to gain a VHF station, it would have surely been the choice of any network, and in this case, it would be NBC. That's what NBC thought as well when WICS signed on, as the programming agreement between NBC and WICS was in effect only as a month-to-month agreement. ABC had already affiliated with nearby Decatur and Bloomington, but as low-powered UHF stations, those ABC affiliates didn't have significant viewership in Springfield. WCIA had already affiliated with CBS, and another CBS station in central Illinois would have brought too much overlap between the signals to ensure market exclusivity for either station. That would have left ABC for WICS if it was to continue to exist at all. With the possible threat of non-existence, the construction of WICS began in the Illinois capital city. Sharing facilities with WCBS Radio would help bring down the initial investment in the station. Once WICS would go on the air, it would continue to operate under the cloud of a possible competitor, which would have brought Channel 20 down very quickly. The potential threat to WICS from a possible second station in the capital city would continue for several years. Details of the construction of WICS are few. But then again, most of the visible construction was indoors. The studios and office space were within the walls of the Leland Hotel, while the only visible construction took place at the WCBS radio tower site. WICS was the second mid-central Illinois television station. Its official sign-on was September 30th, 1953. Channel 20's first broadcast was that of the 1953 Major League Baseball World Series between the New York Yankees and the Brooklyn Dodgers. The play-by-play of the World Series would be undertaken by Mel Allen and Red Barber. Bernie Waterman, the station's first sportscaster, would appear in a pre-game show from the WICS studios, making that the first local TV production. Newspaper accounts of those first days of broadcasting for WICS would include descriptions of the excitement of being able to watch a broadcast of a game which would take place over 1,000 miles away. Installation of a huge microwave transmission tower and antenna on top of the Bell Building at 422 South 5th Street in downtown Springfield would make the reception of the game live from the network possible. The installation of the link was just completed in time for that initial broadcast from NBC. The station would go on the air at 11:30 a.m. on September 30th, 1953, without much pomp and fanfare, delaying the opening ceremonies until the station's start of regular programming the next day. On Monday, October 1st, regular scheduled programming began with local news, weather, sports, and a kinescope of Captain Video from Dumont, and off the coax and the microwave, NBC Network's Dragnet. The initial WICS staff was proudly announced in the Illinois State Journal-Register. Thankfully, though, because this is the only record of employees at those early television stations. A large ad would introduce each member of the station's staff along with a picture and a short description of their job or title. In July of 1954, the power of local television and the reach of WICS became apparent with the success of the station in receiving over 20,000 pledges for the 18-hour United Cerebral Palsy Telethon conducted at the station. In 1955, WICS would receive contributions exceeding $30,000. That was a full $10,000 over the contributions from the 1954 telethon. That telethon attracted, during its run, 18,000 people to the ballroom of the Leland Hotel for the 18-and-a-half-hour telecast, featuring 47 acts, 11 bands, and 9 MCs. WICS would continue its efforts from the UCP organization for several decades. The Illinois State Fair was one of the state's premier annual events, and WICS was there with their first live on-location broadcast. On August 6, 1954, day after my birthday, by the way, Channel 20 aired its first remote telecast, the first in a series of weekly programs directly from the 1954 Illinois State Fair. While at the fair, WICS arranged for a demonstration of television for attendees so they could see yourself on television. This closed-circuit feature took place at the WICS exhibit, along with showing the schedule of shows which would originate at the Television Radio Hall at the fairgrounds.